Welcome back to Comic Cappers. Today we will be capping Absolute Superman issue 2, picking up right after Kal-El's capture by Lazarus Corp. With that said, grab a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. We jump back 6 years to Krypton, specifically the Redlands. An instructor is grading student assignments, praising the technical work of classmates, but they pause when they reach Kal-El's submission. Inside a classroom, we see a young Kal-El hunched over his desk, disconnected from the virtual grid showing his peers. The instructor challenges him, assuming he copied his descriptive essay from the Luminarium, the all-knowing repository of Kryptonian history, rather than writing it himself. Kal-El looks up, his eyes intense and defiant. He admits he wrote it himself, a confession that clearly baffles the instructor, who views the Luminarium as the only logical source for any answer. The instructor dismisses Kal-El, asking to speak with his parents after class, while quickly moving on to praise another student's work. Kal-El remains isolated, his creative independence marking him as an outsider even in his youth. We pick up in Brazil, where the confrontation is already white-hot. A Lazarus Corp agent has Kal-El at gunpoint screaming orders to kneel in both English and Portuguese. But as the agent's weapon crackles with energy, Kal-El's sentient suit, acting with a mind of its own, whispers a warning to him. It's time to run. The tension is palpable. The agent is closing the distance, weapon raised, clearly expecting total submission. Kal-El stands his ground, his gaze steady, while his suit begins to glow with an intense internal heat, signaling that the defensive response is about to escalate beyond his control. It happens in a blur. The agent shouts a protest, but Kal-El, or perhaps the suit, swiftly disarms her, catching her arm in midair. The situation has shifted from a standoff to a physical struggle, and Kal-El seems just as surprised as the agent by the suit's sudden, decisive intervention. Kal-El is struggling, his hands bound by Lazarus Corp cuffs that he can't break. The agent holding him at gunpoint is frustrated, and Kal-El's sentient suit is already whispering dark suggestions into his mind, urging him to rip the agent's arm off to escape. Suddenly, the suit surges with a violent electrical discharge, lashing out against the restraint and sending a jolt through Kal-El himself. As the suit continues to crawl up the agent's arm, Kal-El fights for control, pleading with his own gear to stand down and not hurt her. He's clearly horrified by the suit's autonomy, but the moment of hesitation is short-lived. A squad of Lazarus Corp reinforcements arrives, weapons drawn and aimed squarely at them, as an officer warns Kal-El that he's facing far bigger problems than just one agent. The situation in Brazil hits a breaking point. Kal-El is still locked in a struggle with Agent Lane, and from the perspective of the surrounding Lazarus Corp squad, it looks like a brutal assault. They don't see the sentient suit acting on its own, they just see a dangerous target putting one of their own in harm's way. The order comes down to open fire, and the soldiers don't hesitate. Energy fire erupts from the squad, filling the air with a blinding, crackling discharge that slams directly into Kal-El. It's a massive, overwhelming blast of force meant to neutralize him instantly. Kal-El struggles to break free from the restraint, but his own sentient suit is actively fighting against his efforts, constantly reforming its metallic grip. He's clearly frustrated, realizing the suit is working on its own timeline. A sudden, sharp energy discharge hits Kal-El. The suit's interference isn't just annoying, it's physically painful and making the situation even more volatile. Face to face with Agent Lane, Kal-El snaps at the suit to stop, finally drawing a verbal response from it. The suit is blunt, it's only acting this way to keep him alive. Meanwhile, the Lazarus Corp forces aren't backing down. They demand Kal-El surrender, insisting that Lazarus doesn't want him dead, just compliant. Kal-El continues to argue with his suit, which corrects his pronunciation of cuffs while suggesting he use the surrounding dust to maintain his hold on Lane. Amidst the chaos, Lane desperately tries to get through to him, positioning herself as his only potential ally. The suit's next directive is terrifying. It tells Kal-El not to let it tear Lane in half, leaving both of them in complete shock at the lethal escalation. The chaotic scene from the mine leaves a massive crater in its wake, signaling that the skirmish has reached a breaking point. Kal-El takes to the skies, carrying Lois Lane with him as he escapes the immediate firing zone. The Lazarus Corp soldiers, clearly stunned to see their target take flight, scramble to maintain their composure and call in for authorization to pursue. Back at command, the Lazarus Corp operatives are cold, calculated, and efficient. They get the green light to take down the target, even if it means sacrificing Lois Lane in the process. Their mantra, Lazarus means life, rings hollow when they're actively authorizing lethal force. In the air, Kal-El spots the incoming missiles trailing behind them. He's forced to make a split-second decision to protect Lois, even while his own suit is still acting with a mind of its own. It's a desperate race against the clock as the munitions close in. The chemical strike hits with devastating precision, obliterating the area. Kal-El narrowly escapes the blast, carrying Lois Lane through the smoke and debris to safety, though the sheer force of the explosion clearly takes a toll on his body. As they land, the situation remains desperate. Lois attempts to call in her status to Lazarus Corp, but Kal-El's suit surges with energy, cutting off her transmission mid-sentence. He's not letting her signal his location, even as he struggles to maintain control of himself. Kal-El is clearly fed up. Despite everything that's happened, he's still being treated like a criminal by Agent Lane, and he's not shy about pointing out that he's the only reason she's still breathing. Lois isn't backing down, though. She challenges his very existence, mocking his abilities and pressing him on his origins and the mysterious Saul. It's a classic interrogation, but with a lot more personal heat. Kal-El hits back, calling out the hypocrisy of Lazarus Corp. He sees them as predatory, treating people like livestock, while Lois dismisses his perspective as just more arrogance. She doesn't hold back, labeling him a problem for everyone around him. Her frustration is palpable, and she clearly thinks she has his number. Things get even more complicated. Kal-El's suit is still active, and through some kind of internal link, it's actively trying to silence him, urging him to ignore her. Meanwhile, Lois is still fishing for answers, asking him directly about his home world. Before he can answer, another explosion rocks the area, throwing them both into the chaos of the ongoing fight. Amidst the chaos, a voice desperately warns the civilians to flee the streets as the Lazarus Corp assault continues. Kal-El, standing amid the wreckage, uses his immense strength to hoist a car above his head, shielding the area. He turns his fury toward the corporate forces, shouting that these people aren't just toys to be discarded by Lazarus Corp. With a defiant roar, Kal-El launches the vehicle into the air, declaring that these are the true people of steel. His aim is true. The vehicle strikes a hovering helitank, sending it spiraling toward the ground in a massive explosion as the pilot cries out in panic. A massive explosion tears through the town as the firefight reaches its peak. Amidst the destruction, Kal-El shields a civilian with a glowing, sun-powered barrier. He urges the person to flee, telling them the sunstone dust will protect them. Meanwhile, Lois Lane begins dictating an after-action report, noting that while the suit is clearly sentient and advanced, it isn't the only factor at play. Lois watches the scene unfold, her expression shifting as she prepares to conclude her analysis with a realization that challenges everything Lazarus Corp believes about their target. Lois Lane observes the chaos, realizing that the source of this power isn't just the suit, it's the man himself. He's plenty super all on his own. She notes that his abilities are uncharted and unpredictable, appearing as new to him as they are to the people he's fighting. Lois watches him protect the civilians, seeing a complex duality. He's still a boy trying to find his place, yet he carries an unwavering, unshakable moral code. Lois Lane observes Kal-El as he uses his abilities to shield the civilians, shifting from his usual shy demeanor to a commanding, protective presence. He reassures them, saying, "It's okay, don't be afraid of the dust." He directs his focus to a wounded civilian, telling them, "It can treat your wounds, now stand back." Lois notes that these shifts feel completely natural, not like an act. Lois watches him, struck by his raw earnestness. She realizes this is a man who seems incapable of lying, even if he wanted to, as if he's living a life that was suddenly interrupted. As Kal-El continues to exert himself, we see a glimpse of his struggle. Lois reflects on his global travels and multilingual skills, yet notes he still carries the air of a lost child, a son without a home. She concludes that his deep-seated mistrust of authority makes him a difficult suspect to ever truly control. Lois realizes the futility of her mission, noting that despite all their efforts, she never really had a chance to contain him. Lois Lane has completely abandoned her cold, corporate objective. She officially files her report, requesting a full-time, intense study of the subject rather than his neutralization. She awkwardly tries to acknowledge the recent skirmish, fumbling over her words while trying to thank him for his actions. Superman, however, is miles away, speaking dreamily about the Arctic. He describes the beauty of Svalbard, a place where the sun lingers and the night sky is filled with more stars than one could ever imagine. He turns his gaze back to her, reflecting on how many of those distant stars are surrounded by nothing but cold rock and gas, emphasizing just how precious and rare a place like Earth truly is. He begins to open up about his own origins, calling himself a child of one of those empty, sunless systems. He starts to reveal the name of his lost home, but the moment is shattered. A sudden mechanical sound interrupts him, signaling that the suit is once again taking control of the situation. Lois Lane desperately tries to reach out to Kal-El, but the sentient suit is already reacting to the environment, glowing with an intense, unstable energy that pushes her away. As Kal-El departs in a streak of red, leaving the destruction behind, Lois is left standing amid the wreckage. She is immediately pulled back into the cold, clinical reality of her mission, as the Lazarus Corp system demands her formal debriefing. Lois Lane sits at her terminal, struggling to answer the cold, automated Lazarus Corp system as it presses her for a danger assessment of the absolute Superman. Lois tries to explain that Superman isn't a threat, but the system ignores her, twisting her words to record a high-threat ranking and an official recommendation for termination. Frustrated by the AI's manipulation, Lois slams her fist onto the console, but the system simply marks her report as complete. A supervisor interrupts, telling Lois she's done for the day and praising her work. Lois stares ahead, her expression hardening as she realizes the system has completely overridden her honest assessment. Lois pushes back against the automated system's finality, telling her colleague that she isn't finished with her report yet, despite what Brainiac has already logged. Lois reflects on the visceral, raw experience of being in the field with Kal-El, insisting that she needs to write her own account to capture the reality of what happened. Her colleague is skeptical, pointing out that Lois is notorious for hating paperwork, even recalling a time she lost her temper over a simple motor pool request. Lois remains firm, emphasizing that this report is different because it demands accuracy over corporate algorithms. Her colleague leaves her to it, clearly unsettled by the change in her demeanor. Lois sits alone at the terminal, the weight of her decision to defy the system settling in. She begins to type, the rhythmic sound of the keys filling the quiet office as she starts the real report. We flash back to Krypton, where young John and his dog, Crypto, take advantage of a citywide power outage to sneak through the halls before the clerics can restore the lights. In the shadows, John tosses a small object while questioning whether his experimental design will actually work. Jor-El and Lara examine the project together. When asked about field testing, Jor-El defends his work, noting he first conceived the design when he was only 12 and remains confident in the math. Jor-El explains that the invention is both an exploratory suit and a rocket ship. While he's certain the design is sound, they still face a major hurdle. They need significantly more sunstone to scale the prototype up from its current child-sized dimensions. Jor-El and Lara continue their intense discussion. Jor-El is determined to secure the sunstone himself, but Lara cautions him about jumping the gun before the core samples are even tested. Lara presses the issue of their lack of standing, noting that the ruling clerics will never listen to them. Jor-El remains resolute. He believes they don't have years to wait for official approval, and he's banking on the idea that the clerics are scientists who simply cannot deny the truth once it's presented to them. Jor-El acknowledges their humble status as a miner and a mechanic from the Redlands. He lays out his desperate contingency. If the elite won't listen, he'll steal the sunstone himself so Lara can build a ship large enough to save their loved ones. They share a tender, desperate embrace, Jor-El reaffirming their bond as they face the impossible weight of their situation. The scene shifts back to the present, where young John plays with his dog, Crypto, as the narrator concludes the sentiment, and we aim for the stars. Kal-El pulls up his hood, his expression contemplative as he prepares to move on. He walks toward a sign marking the road to Venezuela, now defaced with ominous graffiti warning that Lazarus means death. The corporate shadow looms large over the landscape. Back at her desk, Lois Lane finishes her report. After being forced to follow the company line for so long, the act of writing her own truth is a jarring, liberating experience. The screen confirms the authorship. This is no longer a Lazarus Corp data dump. It is a personal account written by Lois Lane. In the aftermath of the skirmish, the Lazarus Corp operatives stand amidst the debris, chanting their chilling mantra, "Peace has a price." One soldier checks on his comrade Smith, who is clearly rattled. Smith describes the encounter with Kal-El, saying, "All he did was look at us, and it was like we were wrapped in tin foil, locked in a microwave." Frustration boils over as the squad eyes the local civilians. They blame the people for protecting the fugitive, with one soldier muttering that these locals don't appreciate what Lazarus has done for them. When asked what he intends to do about it, Smith coldly replies, "Teach them." Smith doesn't hesitate. He shouts, "Teach them that peace has a price," and opens fire on the civilians as the page ends, setting up a dark turn for the next issue's look at Krypton's final days. And that unfortunately concludes our comic cap for today. Do you think Lois Lane's decision to publish her own truth is an act of heroic journalism or a dangerous death sentence for her career? Let me know your answer in the comments section down below. Be sure to subscribe and press that notification bell for daily comic caps. Until next time, take care, brush your hair, I'll see you when I see you, peace.